I'm Andrew Martin. I did my PhD at Oxford under the supervision of Lizzie Jeffers, Marc Macias-Fauria and Professor Kathy Willis in long-term ecology. So I'm really being focused on dendroecology, specifically in Arctic regions, and have worked during my PhD on Salix lanata shrubs from the Yamal Peninsula in Western Siberia, and was working on reconstructing soil nutrient availability using stable isotope approaches and connecting this to growth patterns in shrub rings to ascertain the ecological mechanisms driving changes we've seen in the growth patterns of those shrubs over the past few decades, when we've had quite rapid changes in climate. And now I have a postdoctoral position in Oxford, again with Marc, Dr. Fauria, and we're looking to carry on some of that work to apply it to junipers from Finland and Norway, and also look to apply the methods to more shrub species and individuals from around the Arctic, carrying on in Russia as well. And I'll also be working on another piece of work during this project, which is to compile systematically a data set of Arctic biodiversity records, specifically in paleoecology, so pollen and tree rings and other indicators of biotic change during the Holocene. Dendrochronology is the study of tree rings, or shrub rings in this case, but specifically relating that to ecological phenomena. For example, there's the work of Jim Spear in the US with moth outbreaks and migration through the continental US is a good example of dendrochronology. And so we're interested, or I'm interested in trying to understand ecological mechanism from using the practice of dendrochronology or tree ring science. Yeah, so there are some common light stable isotope approaches where you can reconstruct time series by extracting certain compounds from tree or shrub rings, and they can tell you about the proxies of different environmental factors, which are at the individual scale because they've come from an individual plant. So for example, stable oxygen isotope analysis can tell you about a lot about water cycling at your location. For example, the sources of water that plants have used in their relative kind of quantities if you create mixing models. And carbon isotopes can indicate factors such as stomatical conductance or stress, and you end up with annual time indicators of these factors. And during my PhD, I looked at applying another technique, which was stable nitrogen isotope analysis, which has been shown in various settings to indicate the soil bioavailable nitrogen to plants. And that's been, for example, in the US, that's been correlated with sedimentary nitrogen sources to show a correlation between individual based nitrogen availability and catchment scale nitrogen availability. So I was exclusively looking at willow shrubs, which are the dominant kind of component of shrubification in that area. We've already collected with Bruce Forbes and Timo and Penty, collected junipers from a few areas in northern Finland, and they go back quite a long way, so many hundreds of years. So it might be quite interesting to look at some of these techniques with some of those plants. Probably mainly going to be based on computer modeling and lab work, with the microtones and that kind of stuff. But pending coronavirus, we'll see what happens. So we're looking to compile a systematic map of paleoecological records of biodiversity for the Arctic, so we can ascertain where there may be evidence gaps and where we might need to try and focus a systematic sampling strategy to understand more about the dynamics of biodiversity during the Holocene, last 10 to 12,000 years in the Arctic region. So I was involved in a number of side projects while I was in Oxford. So one of those was a local ecological footprinting tool, which was initially led by Kathy Willis and Lizzie Jeffers. And that is a web-based tool that is effectively meant to allow people to investigate, say, where can we damage? So the ecological value of landscapes in terms of beta diversity, the rarity of species in those areas, and various other factors, connectivity and resilience, for example. And that's used by some of the large oil companies, actually, and a variety of commercial and non-commercial NGO clients. And I was involved, I developed the technical infrastructure that runs on during my PhD. The idea is that it's for a landscape scale at the moment. So it would be, for example, the Isle of Man would be a good, maybe kind of example kind of size you'd be interested in, or say Oxfordshire. There would be scope to change the temporal resolution of the analysis, but I'd be more interested in trying to work on new methods to capture quantify the uncertainty around some of the data sets, to really have that on show if it was to be used in that way. It was rather happenstance in that I was very interested in dendrochronology and have worked in, I've done an undergraduate project in France, doing some stabilized tape analysis on tree rings, which was very interesting, and arrived in Oxford to do a master's degree and came across Lizzie Jeffers, who's also interested in these kind of methods, but hadn't really worked with them before. So we kind of combined forces. And then also Marc Macias was also in that Kathy Willis's lab group. So it just sort of evolved from there. It's like, there's these really interesting methods we could use, and there's these people that are really interested in them, and Mark's really got all these Arctic samples, and wouldn't it be cool to try this, this and this? So it sort of snowballed, and now I've done Arctic field work and got very into it.